Hi, I'm Corey Gerard, and I would like to welcome you all to Monster Wars. So join me for part 6 of the epic battle between Darth Vader and Freddy Krueger. After that remark, Vader's zombie troopers abandon Freddy's remains and then attack Nancy as seen. So Nancy attempts to fly up, but the troopers pull her back down and grab this fairy around her legs, waist, and neck. Nancy then activates her fairy eyes and then shoots 24 zombies with golden bolts of energy. Now those 24 shocked monsters are shown waking up as regular stormtroopers. Darth Vader is next seen lifting Nancy into the air with the Force. So she shoots those same energy bolts at him, but Vader blocks and deflects them back onto her with his left hand. Nancy is next shown falling to those scary looking troopers after Darth Vader released her, and she now appears affected by being zapped. Then suddenly the golden fairy flies through the dream portal to help her friend Nancy. Lanae's eyes and hair are clearly seen emitting gold flames. Now the golden fairy heads for the Dark Lord. So Vader quickly lifts all of the troopers into the air by using the dark side, and then he sends 200 troops flying at Fairy Lanae as shown doing so. We then see Lanae activate a shield of lightning which now surrounds her body. Next, the energy shield causes many of those thrown zombies to bounce off of it. Then Nancy is shown getting to her feet with only minor injuries. Freddy's voice is now heard behind her saying, "Oh, look who decided to show up." So Nancy turns to face her arch nemesis and then flies into Krueger. This dream fairy then grabs Freddy's glove wrist with her left hand and his sweater with her right, and then flies him into an outer hallway wall. We then see Freddy smile and say, "Hey Nance, I can tell that you missed me." Now the golden fairy is shown landing in front of Darth Vader, but this Dark Lord stands his ground. Her flaming hair and eyes seem to have him in a curious admiration. Then Lanae points her head at the floor and shoots energy bolts onto the ground, which strikes approaching zombie troops as shown. Now hundreds of Vader's soldiers are shown disappearing as they wake out of this dream, but Vader leaped into the air to avoid the energy that struck the floor. The scene then returns to Nancy and Freddy's struggle as they both grab on each other in a frontal position. Now Nancy ignites her fairy eyes and prepares to shoot Krueger with them. So Freddy replies, "Oh, I see that you've come far, little Nancy, just like your robot brother. But two can play at this game." Then Krueger's eyes are shown glowing bright reddish, and then he shoots red energy beams out of them and at Nancy, but she fires her fairy energy at him too, which came from Nancy's eyes. We then see both of their eye rays intertwine as these combatants are seen struggling on their feet. Next, the golden fairy is shown confronting Vader. She now says, "You would attack your own sister, you cruel monster." So Darth Vader replies by gesturing his right hand at her and then entangles the golden fairy with dark side ropes. Vader next lifts her up into the air and says, "I covet no family except the dark side." Then Fairy Lanae replies, "That very darkness is your curse, villain." She then electrifies her binds with fairy magic, and they disappear from around her as shown doing so. We then see Vader reply, "Impressive." Lanae then quickly flies into Vader and grabs hold of his cape with both of her hands and then says, "Then I'll do my best to impress you more," as shown and heard saying that. Next, Fairy Lanae ignites her fairy eyes and fires a blast at Vader's face mask, but he quickly moves his head and Lanae's energy is seen nicking his masked right side. Darth Vader then grabs her and next throws the golden fairy into the serving area. The scene then returns to the conflict between Freddy and Nancy. Now their eyes are no longer firing energy, but they still have hold of each other. Freddy then presses Nancy up against an outer wall and then tries to stab her face with his razors as shown doing so. Krueger then says, "Who brought you back, Nancy Pants? I thought you were dead." So Fairy Nancy responds by pulling out a light string from her Ghana bracelet and then wraps it around Krueger's gloved wrist. Nancy's light string is then shown cutting off Freddy's hand. Now he yells in pain as his hand attached to razor knives hits the dream floor. Now suddenly, more zombie troops are seen charging in on Nancy and Freddy from both corridor sides, so they both hurry back into the lunchroom. Those stormtroopers are then heard making loud, irritating noises, which adds to the fright sensation. Darth Vader and the Golden Fairy are next shown in their confrontation again. We now see Lanae fly into Vader with her flaming hair and eyes brightest. So Vader grabs her flamed hair, then the fairy shoots gold lightning out of her fingertips and at Vader. This form of energy is now shown impacting the Sith Lord's circuits. She next prepares to blast Vader with her glowing eyes, but he quickly covers up both of her eyes with his two thumbs, as shown doing so. Then off to the far right of them, Freddy and Nancy are seen as pursuing zombie troops also enter this lunch area. Now the scene motions back to Lanae and Vader. The fairy's hair is next shown returning to regular, while Lord Vader still covers her eyes. Darth Vader next probes her mind and sees images of the Golden Fairy's past, which show Lanae as a blonde, curly-haired, pretty, light-skinned, normal female. Now Fairy Lanae shoots this Dark Lord with a second wave of energy from her hands, and then Vader's whole body crackles with yellow electricity again. Now Vader lets go of Lanae's face, so the blonde, curly-haired warrior grabs his cape's center chain. Darth Vader then presses the middle button on his chest plate, and then it shocks Fairy Lanae by sending circuit energy into her body. It happened because of this fairy's closeness to Lord Vader. Now those zombies are shown racing towards Lanae, Vader, Freddy, and Nancy. Then Fairy Nancy quickly floats over to her friend and brother as they recover from energy boats in a crouched down position, as shown doing so. The Golden Fairy then looks on Nancy, and it's obvious that Lanae's eyes have returned to normal too, because they aren't flaming now. Nancy then lifts Lanae to her feet and says, "Well, you took long enough to show up." So the Golden Fairy replies, "Oh, I didn't want to spoil your family reunion." Now the zombie troops are almost upon them, but Krueger turns the ground into a dream quicksand, and then the zombie troops drop into it. Darth Vader then stands to his feet, and he, like the others, are shown watching the fear soldiers sink. Freddy Krueger then laughs as seen doing so. Nancy then turns to Darth Vader and says, "We must combine our strength and kill that foul Krueger once and for all." Then Fairy Lanae says, "Listen to her because your sister speaks the truth." Freddy hasn't apparently turned all of the ground to sand, so he, Vader, Lanae, and Nancy still have floor to stand on. Vader then suddenly yells, "This Krueger has no force greater than the dark side." Now the remainder of Vader's Dream Troopers sink, and then many are shown on the other side waking up. But some of those awakening troops have frightened expressions on their faces. Now back in that dream, Vader quickly charges in on Freddy, and so does the two fairy ladies as seen doing so. Then Krueger smiles and then quickly changes this lunchroom into a hellish looking place, which has meat walls with monster heads on them. Both of the fairies' eyes are bright as they reach Krueger, but Lanae's hair isn't flaming this time. Then Freddy points a razor finger at them and says, 1, 2, 3. Now Vader, Nancy, and Lanae are seen undergoing a costume transformation as those meat walls close in on them. We then see Freddy say, "Yes, this place is strong with the darkness, and I am its true firstborn." Next, Vader is shown losing his connection to the dark side, and he turns back into a younger Anakin Skywalker without his armor, mask, and cybernetics. Then the Golden Fairy Lanae and Fairy Nancy lose their costumes and appear in regular earthly clothing, as shown doing that. Nancy then approaches a mortal-looking Anakin and says, "Jeffrey, it's really you." So Anakin rubs on his normal skin and replies, "You appear to have suffered loss as I did." Nancy then smiles and gives Anakin/Jeffrey a great big hug, but Anakin just looks on with an emotionless stare. Now Lanae Pervy confronts Fred Krueger, and she says, "We destroyed legions of you dark minions." So Krueger replies by saying, "Maybe so, babe, but I'm cut from a different cloth." After that remark, Freddy waves his glove hand, and then the meat wall sends out monster arms that quickly grab onto Lanae, Nancy, and Anakin. Now they are seen being pulled through the moving meat wall. Anakin then begins to channel the dark side into himself, but Krueger directs 7 additional arms to grab Anakin. Now suddenly Anakin is shown waking up from that nightmare, and he's once again the dark armored Darth Vader. Vader was able to keep himself asleep because of his dark side meditation rituals, but his force connection was severed in that dream world. Now, back in that terror dream, Lanae and Nancy are still struggling with those pulling arms attached to hands as Freddy Krueger looks on in delight. And both good fairies are being put into two different sections of that meat wall. Then Lanae manages to muster up her remaining fairy strength to wrestle free. She then runs over to help save Nancy, but many hands grab them through the same part of the meat wall as seen doing so. Freddy is next shown saying, "Yeah, bitches, I got a very special place for you two." Now the scene motion speeds quickly past that gross wall, and then Lanae and Nancy are shown standing in front of the old Elm Street home where Nancy had previously lived. Lanae is wearing a black open sweater with a blue button-up shirt, while Nancy wears a black sweater with a pink shirt blouse. It now looks very foggy in the daytime. The end. Well, stay tuned for part 7 of this epic battle struggle. And thanks for tuning in.